Welcome, everyone, to Catalista's The Beautiful Work Challenge On Birth Conversation. My name is Sabrina Azul, coming to you from the studios at Catalista Centrale. What do you think of when you think of birth? Hospitals? Shouting and pain? Movies and TV usually depict birth as a frightening experience. So, if you're pregnant or thinking about having a child, or if you were born, this program is for you. Birth impacts us all in ways we hardly imagine. And now, I'm happy to introduce three women who are superstars in the world of birth. Betty Ann Davis has been a midwife for more than 48 years and a researcher in the social sciences and clinical epidemiology. She co-edited Birthing Models on the Human Rights Frontier, Sustainable Birth in Disruptive Times, and Birth Models That Work. Betty Ann is an international speaker, and she leads workshops and presentations focusing on breech birth and human rights. Robbie David-Floyd is an American cultural, medical, and reproductive anthropologist, researcher, author, and international speaker known for her research on childbirth, midwifery, and obstetrics. She lectures throughout the world at universities and conferences. Robbie has written and co-edited some 20 books, from Birth as an American Rite of Passage to Obstetric Violence and Systemic Disparities. Deborah Pascali-Bonaro is a world-renowned speaker, filmmaker, doula trainer, and childbirth educator. She's an activist dedicated to healing what she sees as a broken maternity care system. Deborah is the author of Nurturing Beginnings and is the director of the award-winning documentary Orgasmic Birth. Her latest book is The Ultimate Guide to Sex After Baby: Secrets to Love and Intimacy. Betty Ann, Robbie, and Deborah, thanks for joining us, and welcome to the On Birth Conversation.
Thank you. I'm sure we're all happy to be here.
Yeah, really, it's an honor.
We're very honored to have all of you here. So to start our discussion, we've got some conversation starters we'd like to get into with all three of you. And our first conversation starter, over and over in movies and series, birth is presented as a frightening, painful, chaotic event that can only be cured by hospitals and doctors, drugs and technology. What do young women and young people in general need to know about the process of birth? Deborah, let's start with you.
Somehow I had a feeling that was mine, so thank you. Yeah. So I think, one, it's really sad that the media has really accentuated the fear. I think all throughout time there was always some fear about birth, but when birth happened always in a home environment, we grew up around birth. So if we were the, oldest child, we saw siblings come into the world. Our mother might have gone to help support a neighbor, a cousin. So we had this relationship where we had been around birth. We had seen some of the ways that people could move and find comfort and joy and love in welcoming a baby. But I think today the media has driven so much fear. And I know for a lot of people, birth has not been what they hoped for because, as you said in the intro, right, we have a bit of a broken model that's not really serving all people in the way that one is supported by science and gives them the respect, nurturing, and care they deserve. So I think it's really important that people reach out and find what are their stories. How did their great-grandmother come into the world if they can? What are the family stories that might have been positive? If they weren't, what are things that they want to do different? How could they address the fear to build more confidence and joy? And also really listen and seek out the stories from people that have had positive, empowering, joyful births and ask what were the things that they prepared with, what kind of techniques and comfort measures supported them, and listen to stories in different environments. You're going to hear very different things if you listen to a birth in a home birth area, whether or a birth center or in a hospital. So I think for people, knowledge is power. That kind of old saying holds really true in childbirth, but it's really about stories. And don't let the stories define your fear. Instead, find the stories that will define your joy and pleasure and how to achieve that.
That's beautiful, Deb. Yeah, I found that, and I've interviewed over 165 women about their birth experiences, and most of them were terrified of birth, which is really sad. It has a lot to do with your socialization, as you said, the media, the negative depictions of birth. Some media does show, wonderful, healthy, natural births, but mostly they're terrifying. And cultures where birth is regarded as natural and normal, then women tend not to be scared of it. But in the United States, most women are at least a little bit of the reason why they go to the hospital is because they're afraid of something going wrong. So even though childbirth complications occur in only around 10 to 15% of all births, almost everybody, 99% of American or 98% of US women go to the hospital because they're afraid that something bad might happen, even though the risk of complications is so small. But Anne, do you want to add something?
Well, what strikes me is that I know that growing up, I didn't know a lot about birth, but I did know that it was hidden. Just like sex is hidden. Like there's certain things that are considered private, but birth is something, interestingly, when I first really became to understand what birth was about was in Guatemala, because that's where I first saw my first births and where I actually had my first baby in Central America. What I realized is that in all cultures, birth isn't necessarily entirely hidden away. And if in your village in Guatemala or in Africa or someplace where you're out in a rural area, then birth becomes part of the way a woman grows up. She starts to see births when she's even at age 13. So I think one of the dangers that's happened for modern society is that birth has been relegated to a hospital where only the nurses and the doctors have been seeing it. Increasingly, the number of midwives is growing in some of in North America and in some of the high resource countries. But originally, it wasn't quite like that. So I think that aspect of it being hidden away has become a problem.
Yeah, and it's hidden away because it's taking place in hospitals where only the laboring person and their family maybe are with them. It's not, when birth takes place in homes, it's a much more public occasion, depending on if you have the shoes to help the whole family there. In traditional societies, people often give birth in a room where there's lots of other people moving around. It's in the public eye. And it's normal and expected, but here we stick it away in hospitals and keep it out of the daily job. It's like something that is supposed to happen only stuck away here in a hospital room and not any place visible to the public eye.
Yeah. And I would add too to that is we lost then the skill, right? When it's in a community, when it happens, like you said, Betty Ann, in Guatemala, and people see birth, what you're seeing in birth is not only confidence to trust birth, but you're seeing how other people provide comfort. Women in labor move, eat, drink, right? Choose different positions. And I think the media really just shows us people come to a hospital, turn their body over to medicine and lay down. And then all these things happen to them, as opposed to happening where they're the center of attention and the people are there to support them, right? So the media has flipped who has the power, and we've lost a lot of skills. Being a doula, right? I always say that midwives and doulas have all these skills that in some ways got lost that were really part of families.
Yes, and midwives like Betty Ann, who practice what we call the midwifery model of care, they can be nurse midwives who work in hospitals or birth centers. They can be certified professional midwives. But any midwife who practices the midwifery model of care, this is a compassionate, woman-centered model of care. Any midwife who practices that is going to give her client the best birth experience possible. And because the nurse, the midwife giving that, assisting that birth is so positive herself about birth, she's going to lend compassion and strength. Her own trust in birth is going to give the laboring person their own trust in birth. That's why I think it's so incredibly important to increase the number of midwives who practice the midwifery care all over the US and in fact all over the world. Not just any midwives, because many midwives have been highly biomedicalized, but midwives who truly practice the humanistic woman-centered model of care create good birth outcomes because, again, they trust birth and they impart that trust to the women they're serving.
Deborah mentioned something that I think I'd like to pick up on. It's about this notion of wanting to search out the way it used to be. And I think what happens is when you get pregnant, you often really do want to know more about what happened what happened at your own birth, and also what happened when your grandmother had your mother. And being a daughter of a daughter, it becomes more critical. And to me, like one of the things that's happened to me recently is because I've been working in Ukraine, is because Ukrainians live in a country that has been so Soviet dominated. They created a whole system of birth that was very autocratic, very much created by a top-down approach, where the medical world and the world of Soviets was, this is how you do things, and you don't have any questions, you don't have any choice about that. And what's happening as they're coming out and starting to realize their culture again, they're starting to recognize that something needs to change. And what's amazing is sometimes war does that to people, and that's part of the reason I went, is I thought, okay, the war is on now. My grandparents actually were Ukrainian. And I thought, okay, this is the time when people are going to start thinking outside the box. I want to go and be there to witness that. And the irony is that in a place where people are having to have babies in bomb shelters, where over 1,000 health facilities and hospitals have now been bombed, women are starting to fear going to the hospital. And actually, a lot of women are starting to realize they can just do births on with someone who helps them at home. But the problem is that home birth is illegal in those countries.
Yes, midwife Robin Lim, for example, she's the one who won the CNN Hero Award in 2001. She and her team provide disaster care, and they found that 98 of the births, even in disaster areas, even in tents with nothing, the most basic of supplies, babies still come out, mothers still give birth successfully, because the vast majority of births do not need interventions. Disaster zone births give us great lessons in what birth is and the essence of birth. And I forgot to mention before that having a doula present, a doula like Deb, who's a marvelous doula as well as the best known doula trainer in the world, having a doula present increases your chances enormously of having a wonderful birth experience of whatever kind you want, whether you want an epidural or whether you don't. Having a doula present makes it much more likely that you're going to have the kind of birth experience that you want, as does having a midwife who practices a midwifery model of care.
I love how you all made that connection of going back to how it was in the beginning and hearing the stories from your ancestors and grandmothers and great grandmothers. And that was incredible. Thank you all. So our next conversation starter, what are some of the short-term and lifelong consequences for the mother and baby who experience the current system of birth protocols? And Betty Ann, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, that's a very interesting conversation for me. Interesting because I saw my first birth really in Guatemala when I was there. And it happened just after an earthquake. I was asked to go up and help people up in the highlands. I had to learn how to pack a horse and go and just go and be with women having babies. And I was like 20 or so, and I didn't know anything. And they kept saying to me, "Eres tu comadrona?" I'd say, "No, I'm not a midwife, but I can help." And what I discovered is that, yes, those women really got that there's that you just do it. That's what you do. That's what you say. Like, I don't, I always just say that to women generally, just do what feels good. And so the question also becomes for me, what is natural and what does nature tell you? So having worked there for long enough, when I came up to North America, I discovered that there was this fellow by the name of Friedman who had made a decision to mathematically analyze 500 women whose charts he looked at, who had birthed around the area. He was at Columbia University. He wanted to plot them on a graph to see how long their labors were, right? So he did that. And then what happened is he didn't really intend it originally to be something that would limit women, but it started to be used across North America as what I called, I named straight line obstetrics, which is that you have to have the baby within a certain time frame. You have to go, you can't go past an hour or two at any given centimeter. And I started looking at that thinking, well, that's just not the way anybody births. And I just was surprised that anybody was imposing that. But we weren't needing to have that imposition because I was doing largely home births at the time. When I joined with the Midwives Alliance of North America, I started saying, why don't we create a database where we can actually look at that? So we collected over 12,000 births in a database with the midwives from across Canada and North America, and the States, even into Mexico. And I said, I bet you any money there's going to be places where you stop. Like at 5 centimeters, you're going to stop. And at 6 centimeters, you're going to stop. So we actually collected how many people stop and are much more than 2 hours at any given 1 centimeter. And we collected how many often people do that more than once during their birth. And so we basically proved that people hit those plateaus and it's okay. It doesn't mean that the baby's going to die or that you have to fulfill the straight line obstetrics that had been created by this man who had this notion of doing this analysis. So that's just an example to me of how the protocols that have been imposed upon women, which, by the way, in 2018 was finally taken away by the World Health Organization, who realized that the Friedman curve is no longer something that you need to use. Like, imagine it took us about 70 years to get rid of that imposition. You realize that that's just not necessarily the way everybody works. Every woman has her own individual birth. And one other thing about protocols, almost always the protocols become more and more prohibitive, more and more restrictive. They almost always make it so that a woman, her belly's measuring either too small or too big. The baby's heart tone is too high or too low. She's peeing too much or not enough. It just goes on and on. She's going post-date or she's too premature. Premature is something we've got to look at, but being post-date, it's incredible how 10% of women are going to go to 42 weeks. And that's okay. It's so hard to help women, to encourage women that it's okay. Yes, there is in the literature some increased risk of stillborn. It's not that high. We've got to kind of start to think about the probabilities of all those things happening.
Yeah, and I have to say, Betty, and I love how you put that. And as a midwife, I want to say, like, I'm a doula, so I see it in different terms too. I agree with you 100% on everything you said. But as doulas, I get to see how women are led, right? Robin Lemon, you mentioned Robbie. She says too often, and I see this in our hospitals, women are given scare, not care. And for all that data that you showed, right? They're like told, you have to do this. You have to do the induction. And they really scare you into really making an informed decision or really having all the data and all the choices and the options. And I was just watching a film called Birth Time, and they had a beautiful saying in there that I think rings true right now, where they said, women feel that they failed. And I see that too often in birth. I didn't go into labor. My labor didn't go quick enough. I really didn't want the epidural, but I couldn't do it. Like, there's all these failures. And they say in the film, women don't fail. The system's failing women, right? And so I think that all, like you said, the Friedman curve, the things that have been set up along the way to not really trust people's body giving birth, to not allow them to really have a voice and choice and fully understand. Now, I want to say midwives usually do. And I don't want to just say it's just doctors, because some doctors practice the midwifery model, some nurses do. But overall, and I want to say, I think all good people go into obstetrics. You don't want to lose sleep and miss holidays and miss your family. But again, it's a system that's dysfunctional.
Yeah, it's interesting how I'm not sorry to interrupt you, Deb, but I've so many interviewed medical personnel, biomedical personnel I've interviewed. They'll say they make it so they'll look at what's causing the most of some issue, like say the overuse of cesareans. So okay, they get the cesarean rate down, but then the vacuum extractor rate goes up, or they get the use of electronic fetal monitoring down, but then the cesarean rate goes up. I mean, it's just weird how the system keeps self-correcting, because the system is designed to keep women on that assembly line production, on the assembly production line. Wheel them on. One doctor said to me many years ago, we just wheel them in, extract their babies, and wheel them out. Now that was in a Latin American country. In the U.S., it's not so much an assembly line anymore. Birth in the U.S. has become much more humanistic in recent decades than it used to be, much more woman-centered. I think most U.S. obstetricians do their best. And if you're a young woman or a pregnant woman deciding you need to with whom to give birth, you need to ask your doctor, what is your cesarean rate, especially for your first-time mothers. And if the cesarean rate for first-time mothers is over 20%, you want to run away. Unless you want a cesarean, you want to run the other way, because that is not your guy. If its overall cesarean rate is 32%, which has been the national average, then that's okay, because that's the national average. What I think is interesting about that in the U.S. is that while cesarean rates have skyrocketed all around the rest of the world, and not in the Scandinavian countries, but in many other countries, especially lower income countries, cesarean rates have skyrocketed. But in the U.S., the cesarean rate has remained stable from 2011 until today. It stayed at 32%. So I'm giving our U.S. obstetricians credit for keeping the cesarean. I think they're making conscious efforts not to let it skyrocket. Some hospitals have 50% cesarean rates in the U.S., but many, overall, the average is still exactly 32%, precisely what it was in 2011. So I'm proud of our obstetricians for not letting it, go higher than that.
I would say 32% is pretty high for me.
It is, but at least it's been stable. I think Brazil got 50%, 68%. Greece has 65%. Most Latin American countries have cesarean rates of 45% or higher. 32% is better than that. It's not optimal, but it's better than those.
Right, but when the WHO said in 1985 that it really only needs to be between about 10 and 15%, and we know some people who attended that meeting who said they were actually thinking that was what they were going to sell the OBs on, because really they thought it should be much lower. And when you know that, like that data we collected on the midwives, we show that for the CPM, Certified Professional Midwives study we show that the cesarean section rate can be for normal women like normal women birthing that are not high risk. So people that are not carrying a premature baby or twins and breeches, their cesarean section rate in our group was 3.7%. Now, these are women who were motivated to not to go in possibly for an epidural, and not go in for augmentation, and not go in for all the various things that could be used to speed up their labor, make it less painful. These are women who made a decision to use tubs, who made a decision they were going to do it. And it's that motivation, as I said before, that really helps them to get through that. But it shows that really works. Because at that time, for that same group of people in the States, the C-section rate was 19% as opposed to 3.7%. And with women with the fairly same statistical or history of problems or non-problems. So there's definitely something going on with attitude. There's definitely something going on with the way hospitals are managed. There's definitely something going on with the free births that are starting more and more in the States, Canada, and actually in Europe. I just came back from Europe. Women they're always taking off. They're always thinking they want to do it in a different way.
Great point, Betty Ann. And I just want to add, in your study, right? Those were mostly at home, weren't they?
That was a home birth. Well, it was home birth. It was 3.7% cesareans versus 19% in the planned hospital births.
Yeah. I just want to add that for everyone listening because that's huge, right? Your place of birth, if you are able to birthing at home or in a birth center, you're going to have a much lower rate of interventions. So those are really good questions. I love, Robbie, that you said too, ask your provider what's their rate of cesarean. But I would encourage you all to make sure you interview someone, a midwife that does home births, visit if you're, fortunate to have a birth center in your region, go see that, go see your hospital and ask these questions because they're not all the same. They're going to put forward a different model of care, and your rate of interventions is really going to be linked to the model of care that you choose. And I always ask how often there's water and movement and upright birth and all the other things. Don't just ask the interventions, you need to ask all the other things too.
Yeah, you're right, Deb. I forgot to mention that. Yeah. Especially even if you're terrified of birth and really think you want to be in the hospital, it's good. It would be very good to go visit birth centers in your area because they're so different. They're so humanistic. They're so holistic. There's big tubs with water available. Of course, there's no epidurals in birth centers. So if you want an epidural, go to the hospital. I would have one thing to say about epidurals. If you truly want an epidural, if you can possibly wait until you're 6 centimeters dilated before you get it, epidurals, when given too early in labor, can slow labor down significantly and make your labor last a lot longer. But if you wait 6 centimeters, so up to 5 centimeters is known as latent or early labor. And after 6 centimeters, from 6 centimeters on is active labor, which proceeds much more quickly than does earlier latent labor. Latent labor can take 2 to 3 days. In my case, it took 2.5 days for latent labor to happen. For many people, it does. So when people go to the hospital too early, and then they get a cesarean for failure to progress, it's because they went too early. Once 6 centimeters is hit, labor provides much more rapidly. So if you do want an epidural, by all means have one, but try your best not to have it till 6 centimeters so your labor won't be slowed. And then you're likely to have a much better birth experience overall.
Robbie, you've just brought up something really important, and that is...
Oh, I said something important. Oh my God, I put a shock.
This thing about latent phases, because at one point when we were really very carefully, we're still doing it actually in the hospitals in Canada, and this program is starting to go into the States. There's this program called More OB, which was a program that was developed in order... Partly it was developed because as midwives were coming into the legislation like 30 years ago in Canada, the OBs and the hospital administrators realized we were going to have some problems, a bit of a clash possibly with these renegade midwives who've been doing home births, trying to fit into the hospital system. So they said, okay, we're going to put the OBs and the nurses and the midwives together in the same room. They're going to have a workshop together, and they're going to look at the actual research. Because this was happening at a time when people were starting to look at actual research as opposed to depending on the old boys club, Williams obstetrics opinion about what should be done in birth. And when they did that, what was amazing is one of the most hot topics was length of labor and how it should be managed. But wonderfully, from the research, we discovered, and we actually had, I remember this little card that we used to say, the worst place for a woman to be in early labor is in the hospital.
That's right.
Because what happens is everybody wants to, she's been sitting here waiting and she's not really going anywhere. We should just give her oxytocin. She'll get the show on the road. And what happens is if you start to do augmentation at that point, it's a really dangerous time to do it because your body is still trying to figure out how to get the cervix narrow. It's trying to efface it. It's trying to get not dilate it yet necessarily, but trying to make it shorter. And I thought it was so great that the OBs were coming around on that at that time. So we've come a long way, actually. And you know, when your own American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology decided to say that labor does not start until 6 centimeters, in Canada up here, we were just rejoicing, going, "Oh my goodness, they've seen the light." It's great.
Yeah, there are some hospitals that don't admit laboring people until they are at 6 centimeters because they know that early admission just causes more interventions. And those hospitals, which are few in the US, have very low cesarean rates. I also want to mention, in addition to early or late in labor versus active labor, I also want to mention what Sheila Kissinger, she was a famous British anthropologist and childbirth educator, she called it the rest and be thankful stage of labor. And that is when your cervix gets to 10 centimeters, the nurses immediately start exhorting you, yelling at you, push, push, or attempting to push. No, no, no. The uterus needs to now, the baby has descended, right? It's getting down, 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 going down. The uterus is still up here. So it takes time for the uterine muscles to descend and push the baby down, 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 and out. So after you get to 10 centimeters, often labor can stop completely for up to half an hour. And you get to rest and be thankful if you're left alone and if your practitioner trusts the process. The 90% of labor and delivery nurses are going to be going, push, push, come on, push. And you're straining and you don't have the urge to push. So my advice on that is never push if you don't feel the urge to push. Wait till your body feels the urge, and once it feels the urge, then just flow with that. Let that force and energy rush through you, and then you'll push out much more easily. But if you try and force yourself, that's counterproductive, extremely counterproductive.
You know, the other thing that I remember, I'm not sure that the midwives do this as much as we used to do it. I mean, I'm still practicing here. I'm doing fewer births. I'm doing the daughters of the daughters. That's a lovely thing to do when you're a doula or a midwife and you've been in the same community for quite a while. But one of the things we used to do, if sometimes their labor would just stop. It hasn't happened to me for a long time. I did have one, it was about 3 or 4 hours. I just did the daughter of one of the midwives one of the women whom I've attended like 30 years ago. Her daughter came to me and she had a terribly long labor. Her mother, fortunately, was a doula and she came and we had like a 3-day labor. But I did with her something we used to do quite a bit. And that is if your labor stops or you're not going very far, and you're not going very far fast, I just leave all my equipment at the house and leave and say, okay, when things pick up again, call me back. And I did that. This particular birth actually was happening at the time of the eclipse. When the eclipse happened, she went into better labor. I mean, I think that those natural events, natural things like you're really wanting your mother to be there and she's not there and she's in Seattle taking a plane to see you and you're not going to really go into labor until she's there because you don't feel comfortable. Those things are so real with women in labor. And so natural events that aren't necessarily social events also seem to have a play in birth.
Absolutely. I'll use one of my births as an example. I gave birth by cesarean the first time and was a home birth the second time, a home VBAC, an HBAC. And I went into labor and I thought it was real labor. I'm having contractions, I'm moaning, I'm groaning, and the midwives are like laughing at me. And I'm like, what's so funny? And they're like, this is early labor. This is nothing. You're not even 4 centimeters. I mean, like get over yourself, right? And on the second day, they pack up and go home. And I'm like, where are you going? And they're like, well, you're still in early labor. And so we're going home because we need to take care of our kids. We're not going to sit here and babysit you. You've got a doula here. You can handle it. So sure enough, on the second day, my labor stopped completely for like 6 hours. And I got to sleep and eat and have a great time with my friends. And a massage therapist came over and gave me a massage. And after the massage, labor picked up a little bit. And all night long, I had intermittent contractions every 10 minutes or so. So I was able to get a lot of sleep. And then on the morning of the third day, which is a Friday, I woke up and I got up. I was still having contractions every 10 minutes. I got up and I'd get in the hot tub that was all ready for me. And oh my God, active labor kicked in like that. And I went, holy OMG. Now I understand the difference. Now this is like 100% different than early labor was. And that was on the morning of the third day of my labor. So,
Yeah.
yes, if your labor stops, I don't know why my labor stopped. It could have been my uterus. It was a 10-pound baby. A lot of people's labor stop around or stall at plateau at around 8 centimeters because of emotional issues. Like maybe they just need to cry. Doulas like Deborah are excellent at saying, do you feel like crying? Are you afraid of something? And the woman might say, oh my God, I just now realized I don't know how to parent 2 children or 3 children or 5 children, or my husband is leaving me and I don't think I can care for this baby by, and of course it's a little bit late, right? You're already in labor. But if a woman's labor stalls for emotional reasons, don't give her Pitocin, give her emotional support and let her cry. Just hold her and let her cry. And so many labors, when someone compassionate is holding her and letting her sob, then she sobs it out. She lets go of all the pain, or maybe she takes a shower and cries in the shower, and then later just picks up again because the emotional issue has been handled.
You so should have been a midwife.
Yeah, I think I missed my calling. Oh, well, I'm a pretty good anthropologist, so I guess it's all right.
Deborah, do you have any thoughts on lifelong consequences for the mother and baby for this current system of protocols?
I mean, I would say as a doula, I did a lot of work with Dr. Klaus and Dr. Kennel, two renowned perinatologists. They've passed on, ancestors, but they had a lot of wisdom about mother-baby bonding. And as much as they said our system many times is creating trauma, creating gaps in that, one thing I appreciate that they said is humans have the capacity to heal. And they always wanted to make sure that no one felt guilty if they had a difficult birth or if they were separated from their baby at birth, whether it was needed or many cases not needed, that we could overcome and could heal. But they always said, why are we creating these gaps when we could be keeping them together? Why aren't we focused, rather than on healing, on creating optimal environments so that people come through birth feeling connected, feeling honored and respected? And this could be the most powerful day in a person's life, and entering parenthood in that way, with that joy and love and connection. Dr. Sarah Buckley, who does so much on the hormones of labor too, talks about when we're having that physiologic birth where our hormones are working. They're designed to have us fall in love with our babies. We trigger the pleasure and the reward center. And I love how she says it's the best first date ever. Like, you are designed to fall in love within an hour. So I do have to say it is tragic when our current system doesn't consider the impact of our overuse of interventions, or even when we're having a cesarean birth. How do we do that gently? How do we ensure that that person still feels honored, respected, loved?
Deb, you know all about gentle cesareans, right?
Yeah, definitely. We're doing them here in Jersey more and more, but not all the time. And this is where I go crazy as a
You want to
doula.
explain what a gentle cesarean is, or do you want me to?
I'm happy to. So a gentle cesarean is not a surgical technique. It's just really the mindset of when the baby's emerging, inviting that mother, that birthing person, if they want, to look down and actually see the baby emerge. We use clear drapes now so that it's easy to just see through. And then the baby is really held right up to see, and we allow the cord to still keep pulsing because we know that that cord blood blood is really essential. Cutting that cord too quickly, the baby can lose up to a third of their blood volume. And think about it, anybody today, if you lost a third of your blood, think about how you would feel not only today, but how long it would take you to recover. So gentle cesareans honor that we wait to cut the cord till it stops pulsing, and then as soon as possible, that baby's skin to skin, even if that's cheek to cheek, up high on their chest. And so really understanding that mother baby are a unit and they need to be together. And even if it's a challenging situation, care can be done for each of them, keeping them still together. And I have to add, one of our midwives, Lonnie Mars, always in a gentle cesarean, always looks directly at that person and says, your baby's about to be born, push your baby out. And even though they don't have the feeling to push, the recognition that the room goes silent, that the focus is this is their birth. It's not everybody talking about where they ate dinner last night and that person's just laying there with a baby being born. It's a room of people that are called in to honor them. And so we can make every birth sacred, special, and meaningful in the way that honors that person's beliefs, values, culture, and family. Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
This is a picture of a gentle cesarean. The doctors are holding the mother, so the mother's looking at the baby. There's no sheet between them. In some gentle cesareans, there's a plastic sheet up, and sometimes there's not a sheet at all. And the mother is about to reach down and pull her baby toward her. She pushed a little bit, and then she reaches down, and the obstetricians give the baby to her almost immediately after the birth. So much more active, the mother can participate. If you're going to have a cesarean, please have a gentle cesarean like this. It's so much more empowering for the mother and for the baby as well, and makes breastfeeding so much more easy to establish.
I think the key concept here is that when you have a birth, it only happens a few times in your life. Maybe it will only happen one time in your life. And so like marriages, like other milestones in your life, you want to plan for something really special. You want to know who you're going to be with, where you're going to have the baby, how it's going to be done, why people are going to be doing various things they do. So it's really important to research it. And also, because it is such a special thing, it is the beginning of your life as a mother. And I know that the term mother has been trodden along with the term woman. And I have some concern about that, not just as an older midwife, but I've worked in a lot of cultures where if you don't continue to use the word women, we're handing up on a platter the ability for us to claim our rightful place in a society that might be thinking more and more that it's not something we necessarily should be cultivating. But I think that the idea of marriage tradition, whether or not you get married doesn't matter to me. But I think the idea of wanting to be connected to society, to the family, to nature is a really important piece. And so if you do have a cesarean section, all that's telling you is that you're going to embark on a very thoughtful process about how that happened, why that happened, whether it was a good idea. If it was a good idea, perfect, because it might have been something that was needed to save your baby. But if it didn't happen for a good reason, you're going to start to really question a lot of things that you need to question. And it will help you to question all the things that occur to your baby as the baby's growing up. And those pieces that we take from each experience we have in life and what we do with them is what is most important and what makes us good parents. So birth is the beginning of that.
Thank you, Betty Ann. You're all making, really bringing out the beauty in birth here. So we're going to get to our last question now. Is there a bigger agenda at play when it comes to birth? For example, to remove the burden of birth from women altogether? And Robbie, we will start with you.
Well, that's That's a very interesting question, and I don't think that the answer is yes. I mean, there's a lot of sci-fi, stuff about growing babies in artificial machines and stuff and there are all kinds of assisted reproductive technologies like in vitro fertilization, but no, there's test tube babies can be fertilized in embryos, yes, and they can be implanted into a mother's womb, but it's still got to be a woman men can carry babies, transgender men can carry babies, of course, but no, I don't think that there's any time in this century anyway when we're going to start having babies growing them in artificial wombs. I'm not seeing any indication that that's going to happen. What is happening is that birth is one of the most lucrative arenas for biomedicine. Hospitals make so much money off of attending births, especially cesareans. Cesareans cost a fortune in the US, and hospitals make, lots and lots and lots of money. Every time you use the electronic fetal monitor, every time you do a cesarean, doctors get paid $10,000 to $12,000 or more for cesareans. Deborah, I'm sure you know more about this, but there is definitely a move to keep birth in the hospital because it's so lucrative. And many obstetricians in the US perceive birth centers and home births as threats to their incomes, because the more home births you have, or the more freestanding birth center births you have, the fewer hospital births you have. However, there's the cumulative amount of births in the US in homes and birth centers is 2%, homes and birth centers. It's a tiny majority of the population, and yet you open a birth center and you're going to get doctors coming to try to shut you down if they can find a reason to. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's a tiny percent of the population, but that many obstetricians see that as a threat to their incomes, because obstetricians are generally very wealthy people. They make a lot of money, as do anesthesiologists, as do the companies who manufacture electronic fetal monitors and all the technologies that are used in birth. Deb, you want to add?
I agree with you, Robbie. I think in the US, birth is a business, right? And so we have a business model. And so in a business model, it's about market share. And even though birth at home or birth centers is a small percentage of the market, they're worried that it is growing. There is more interest as people are realizing that they can't always have the birth they want in a hospital setting, because the drivers are to have you use more, which increases the bill and everybody makes more money. So I do hear you. I'm in New Jersey, and some of our midwives just lost privileges in some of our hospitals, and we're all like screaming right now going, how can that possibly be when we know how valuable midwives are? We know that they're cost efficient. We know that they really work with people and have improved outcomes, lower rates of interventions. But again, the system doesn't make sense, because if it was a system for better outcomes, we'd be scaling and having more midwives. But if it's a system for more money, then as you said,
I've noticed the same thing here in Austin. It's like obstetricians in hospitals where nurse midwives work tend to let them be until they get up to 30% of the births in the hospital. And there's something magic about 30%, and then suddenly all the midwives get fired, because the obstetricians go, my God, they're at 30%. That's a third of our births. We can't let that happen. We're losing money. And then they fire all the midwives who have much better outcomes and who save hospitals many thousands of dollars, and insurance companies many thousands of dollars. But they cost doctors money. So that's why some doctors love working with midwives, but many doctors resent them and consider them to be financial competitors.
Well, that's part of the reason why in Canada, 35 years or so ago, we had people looking at reproductive rights. And because we have universal healthcare coverage in Canada, where births are all paid for, except the home births at that time, the government started looking at what would be a cost beneficial system, what would be most satisfactory to women, what would make the healthcare practitioners also happier, and what would give most choice to most people. And it became a system where you have midwives and physicians, where you try to create a situation where women can feel more and more comforted by being in places that are not tertiary care settings, where these high level hospitals, where management is shown to actually be a social determinant of whether or not you're going to have more intervention, because if you're in a tertiary care setting, even if you're having a normal birth, the likelihood of you having more intervention is going to be higher. And they just decided to recognize midwives, but also to make sure that we were required by law not just to offer hospital birth, but to offer home birth to every woman. What that means, and every birthing person, what that means is that I get paid for home births, I get paid for hospital births, I get paid for birth center births, and I am required by law to tell women about all those different places where they can have their babies. We just had a birth not that long ago in a teepee here because I had an Indigenous couple that really wanted to go back to traditions that they were studying, that they were feeling closer to. And although my practice partner said, "You're going to do what? You're going to have a TP birth, Betty Ann, there's going to be no plumbing and electricity where they are. What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, we don't have to have a plug in a hot water, an electric blanket for the baby, we can have a hot water bottle like we used to. The ambulance can get there by showing them where it's going to be." It was in the middle of a huge 150-acre farm that's actually in the city center, well, not the city center, but near the city. And it was a lovely birth because the couple really felt that the mother felt really wonderfully at home in this teepee. It was during the month of November. We didn't realize she was going to give birth 2 weeks late. And so she ended up having the baby on the first snowfall of that November. And it was talking about the media. The media decided to come and do an interview with her afterwards. And one of the questions that didn't come out in the media that was actually broadcast was the broadcaster said to her, "Well, what did you feel when you were just there in the teepee with your husband and your dog and your midwives? What did you feel about what it was like, just you against nature?" And the mother immediately said, "Well, I kind of thought it was like me with nature." I thought it was so great. It was such a good comeback. And she also talked about being in the teepee. And there's there's a hole in the top of the teepee. And she looked over and she saw the crows fly overhead. And she said, "That was my sign that I knew that nature is with me and I could do this." And so I think that there's something to that, tapping into that. There's something really, really important about that. That we need to tap into. I think all women should try to tap into that natural thing. It's very difficult to do that in a hospital setting, but we could try.
What a beautiful story. I love that, Betty Ann.
It was lovely, Betty Ann. Thank you.
I could listen to all of your stories for hours. They're just so incredible and
We could tell them to you for hours.
I really appreciate all of your insights and learned so much in this short time. But is there anything else that any of you would like to add to this conversation? Anything? It doesn't necessarily even have to answer the questions we had, but anything that you'd like to add because of what you all do?
For me, it would be know yourself, know what you want. Get in touch with your body when you're pregnant and know what kind of birth you really want. Like, you might think you want a home birth, but if you don't really want a home birth, then your home birth is going to end up in the hands for hospital transfer. You might think you want a hospital birth, but if you don't really want a hospital birth, then you're going to end up giving birth at home accidentally, or not, or be miserable in the hospital. So I think the most important thing for a woman to do is to know yourself. Is your fear so great that you need to be in the hospital for birth because you'd be too terrified to be able to enjoy giving birth at home? Or is your fear of the hospital greater than your fear of home? I mean, just know yourself and know your body's strengths and limitations, and then trust in birth, trust in the baby, trust in your intuitive processes. And if you choose to have a natural birth, then the best advice is to flow with it. For example, there was this book called Water Dancer that Jonathan Levin wrote many years ago. The swimmer was swimming, like, say, from Florida to Cuba, for example. I don't remember exactly where. And the first time she tried, she almost drowned. There was a boat alongside her, and she was in the hospital for 2 days, for 2 weeks, all swollen and bloated, and because she kept thinking how long, how much longer, and thinking that exhausted her. So once she recovered, she tried again, and this time she got lost in the strokes. There's just this stroke and this stroke. You can't get there. You cannot, it's impossible. You'll never get there. But you can always do one more contraction. You can always say one more stroke. And through taking one more stroke after one more stroke, she suddenly found herself on the sand on the other side. And that's how labor is. If you can just do one more contraction and just flow with those contractions, let them carry you, just surrender them. Don't try to fight them. Don't tend to, what you resist persists. That's really important to understand. What you resist persists. So don't resist the contraction. Don't fight the pain. Open up and let go into it. Surrender into it. And if you surrender to the contraction, then the pain will go away and there will be just a oneness, an amazing, magical oneness. Midwives call that entering labor land, literally labor land with 2 capital L's. That's my last final piece.
I love that connection, that story you were telling about Naiad, who she swam across from Florida to Cuba. Yeah.
Some of you probably know where I'm going to go, because I think not only all that Robbie said and know yourself and that, but birth can be joyful, pleasurable, orgasmic. As you know, I did orgasmic birth, and I gather stories from all over the world. And I think by not connecting birth to an intimate part of our sexuality, understanding that birth is going to take us to every part of our bodies, of our emotional well-being, of our spiritual, it's going to take us deeper and ask more of us than we can imagine. So really preparing for birth by honoring that. Go to educators, make sure you're getting the background, because if you learn how to connect to these, if you can tap into the energy, I work with a lot of people that face their challenge. It can be intense, but they have a lot of joy and pleasure and call it an orgasmic birth. So I would say dream big, everyone. I don't think we're really talking enough about all that birth holds and what's available.
I was just thinking about something for me that's been one of the most important things in my life for both my own career, but also working with the people that I work with, and that is be creative. When you're having a baby, you're creating a life. When you're having a baby, you need to think creatively. You are going to be endowing this child with creativity. And so if you have a silly notion, like having a TP birth, just ask for it. If you want to do something, like you're in the hospital and the physician says, well, we have to do this, say, why? I'm just thinking about things that people need to do in labor, where not just in planning the labor, but in also during the labor, thinking, oh, maybe I don't want to be in this pool after all. Maybe I really want to be outside in the cool air. We actually had a woman running outside here in Canada in the snow because she was so hot in the house, because she had a wood stove, and it was like in a little hut, a little place out in the woods. She went outside and she told her son that she was going out to take a dump, and so he ran out with her to take a dump. But he took a little dump and she took a really big dump. She had the baby in the snow practically. I went and we caught the baby, but it was like, that's what she needed. She needed to get out of the heat. So you have to follow your soul. You have to follow what you're thinking. And it's one of the most beautiful times when you can do that, because whatever you want to do, you should be able to do. If you have to fight with the doctor to do what you want to do it. We just had a birth. We just had a birth. I'm so happy. I feel, I do breeches. I sometimes feel like I can't leave town. I waited for a woman. She was at 42 weeks. Breeches have been really, I always say it's the microcosm of everything else that's going wrong with obstetrics. And this woman had a birth. She didn't feel like she was going to be able to make it because she went to 42 weeks. She thought, oh no, I'm never going to be able to do it. And so I stayed and waited for her. And then she decided, oh, I don't really want to do it. I think I'll just do a section. And I couldn't believe it. I've been waiting. Like I canceled Ukraine. I canceled all kinds of stuff going on in Poland. And, but there was another woman same week who said, I'm going to do this. And my everybody that I was with said, Betty Ann, it's okay. You can go. We can do this. We're going to do this with the physicians. The physicians don't usually do the breaches at our place. And they decided to do it with her. They decided they were not going to make her go into the operating room because she took this 4-hour seminar that I give people. And then all the midwives are going to start giving instead of myself. And the doctors were with us. One of the doctors has seen 9 upright breech births now. And he let her do it out of the operating room, sitting on a birth stool. They didn't need any maneuvers. And that's how over half of them come out now, if you just sit on a birth stool. So be creative, ask for what you want, and don't accept anything that you don't want. And don't say later, oh, I didn't think they would let me do that. Never say that. Always say, could I just do this? And do you think I could? And you can ask in a nice way. So I had another case with a woman who the doctor said, I said, I didn't have right to do a breech at that place either. I said, do you think, because she said, oh, she's 7 or 8 centimeters. She's been there too long. We should do a section. I said, well, I think I could just do a badge exam to see if I could do something. She says, you are not the most responsible person. You should not be doing this. And what the mother said to persuade the doctor was, she said, could we have a minute? What a great line. Use it. The doctors left the room. I did a badge exam, pushed the cervix over, and the baby was almost out by the time they came back in. So, be creative.
Yeah. Yeah, a midwife once told me about the obstetrician told me about a cesarean that the woman was all prepped and was on the table, and the baby was crowning. And the obstetrician went ahead and did the cesarean.
Oh, no.
And the lady was like, why did I do that? The baby was crowning. Why? And why she did that, because it was what I call the ritual train. The cesarean's all set up. The mother's got her epidural. She's got, everything's ready. So she just kind of went on autopilot and did a completely unnecessary cesarean. After that, she cried for 2 weeks. She was so mad at herself for having unnecessarily, ruined this woman's birth. The woman was crying because she didn't want a cesarean. And there she was, and the baby's crowning, and the doctor just does a cesarean anyway. That shows the power of many obstetrician socialization into, it has to be a cesarean. That's a sad note to end on. So I want to end on a happier note by saying that what I was talking about, surrender, came from my own personal experience, because during my home birth with my son, I did that. I dove onto my bed face first it looked so appealing. I just kind of dove down into it first, and this miracle happened. And the miracle was that suddenly everything fell away, and it was suddenly like I stopped fighting the pain. For 3 days I had been dancing with it, chanting with it, singing with it, talking to it, trying to do something about it. And suddenly I let go, and I said, take me, I'm yours. I mean, literally, I said to the pain, take me, I'm yours. In that moment of total surrender, the pain was gone, and I was floating above my body, like 4 feet up in the air, looking down at my body, and I was in utter, complete, and total bliss. And that lasted for maybe 45 minutes until my waters broke. And then my doula exclaimed because the waters broke all over her dress, and she goes, oh, and that popped me out of it. And I couldn't get back into it, but I had that experience, and it was magical, and anyone can have that experience if they want it. I mean, birth is what you choose. In many ways, birth is what you choose to make of it. And remember that the ideology of your primary practitioner is going to have the most effect on your birth experience. It's been proven that the ideology of the birth practitioner, what they think about birth and what they believe about birth, is going to have far more impact on how your birth turns out than your own ideologies and beliefs, because they're the ones in power, unless you choose to take the power for yourself.
Thank you, Robbie. Betty Ann, I think you should have a t-shirt made that says, "It's your birth, so speak up."
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you all so much, Deborah, Betty Ann, and Robbie. Thank you all for taking the time. I know you're all incredibly busy, so we really appreciate you being here and giving us your knowledge, and continue the good work.
Thank you so much for bringing the three of us together. We haven't seen each other necessarily for a while. It's so nice to get together with old friends and just kind of hash things out.
Sorry, who's old? I beg your pardon. Yes, thank you for getting us together. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this beautiful work challenge on birth conversation. And thanks to our guests, Robbie David-Floyd, Betty Ann Davis, and Deborah Pascali-Bonaro. You can find the current schedule of Catalista podcasts, including the Beautiful Work Challenge, and sign up for our weekly email at catalista.net. If you enjoy the show, please add, comment, and like us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate everyone who subscribes to Catalista on Patreon, where contributors can access merch and bonus interviews. The Beautiful Work Challenge On Birth Conversation was edited and mixed by Joshua Cash. Our music is composed by George Jennings. The executive producers are Chicky Munch and Binny Bunny Munch, with assistance from Ed Goldberg and Gerald Gerbil. This is Sabrina Azul signing off from the studios at Catalista Centrale. See you next time.